My husband and his twin brother had an accident while away. The news that one was dead and one injured reached home, and my sister-in-law cried until her eyes were raw. When I finally saw my husband return alive, the knot in my chest was at last untied. Just as I was about to run to him, he handed me an urn. "Sister-in-law, I'm sorry. The hospital made a mistake, the one who died was my brother." The sister-in-law beside him stopped crying. I pressed my lips together and, obediently, took the urn and began to cry. Mason had prepared himself for my doubts. He hadn't expected me to accept his death so readily. After all, the initial reports had said it was Miles who had succumbed to his wounds. His twin brother. Hearing me sob his name now, Mason felt his scalp go numb. He put on a show of steadying me, but I seized the chance to grab his arm. Around the forearm, halfway down, was a thick bandage. It was a brutal effort. To erase the birthmark that set him apart from Miles, he had gone so far as to cut away his own flesh. My nail sank hard into his skin. Mason flinched from the pain, but when he met my tear-blurred eyes he didn't dare pull away. I could only offer the dry consolation, "Sister-in-law, be strong. Brother in heaven wouldn't want to see you so heartbroken." I wiped my tears away. "You're right. I should pull myself together. After all, from today on, Ava, am a widow. My parents-in-law died early, my husband is a recently deceased. So if I decide to terminate the pregnancy, there's no need to inform anyone else." People always said the two brothers looked exactly alike. Mason also thought that playing his own brother would come naturally to him. Actually, that's not the case. Even if he removed the birthmark on his arm and tried to imitate Miles, some subconscious habits and mannerisms would always betray him. Besides, I'm his wife who has lived with him day and night. I knew at first glance that the person who returned was my husband. I could recognize him, no matter which life, I would. It's a pity that my past life self simply couldn't understand why Mason would pretend to be his brother. So she stubbornly kept proving to others that he was Mason. Mason adamantly denied it, and my sister-in-law Claire even called me shameless, accusing me of lusting after her man as if my husband were dead. But they all knew perfectly well that the one who was alive was Mason. Strangers' looks toward me gradually shifted from pity to disgust. They all assumed I had gone crazy because I couldn't accept my husband's death. It was especially Mason's attitude that pushed me to the brink several times. It wasn't until I discovered I was pregnant that a spark of hope flared up again. I thought that if I could give birth to this child, Mason, for the sake of his own flesh and blood, surely would no longer deny his identity. When I was pregnant, Mason did indeed stop resisting contact with me. He even took the initiative to come and take care of me. Although he still refused to admit that he was Mason, I still felt it was a sign that things were getting better. I gave birth to a boy. Mason was overjoyed. For a moment he even blurted out, "Thank you for your hard work, Ava." I, who was nearly exhausted from the delivery, finally breathed a sigh of relief. In the end Mason admitted it. How could Miles have called my name? When I woke again, the baby was gone. What met my eyes was Mason's grief-stricken face. He told me that the child had died after sudden respiratory distress and unsuccessful resuscitation. Once more, he said those words to me, "Sister-in-law, accept my condolences." I was discharged, and I truly had gone mad. Mason moved to the city with Claire. And I became the town's despised madwoman. Every day the thing I did most was sit on the stone at the crossroads and stare into the distance. Whenever someone passed by I would shout at them, "Mason is back! Mason is back!" Sometimes a mischievous child would follow behind me and mimic, "Mason died long ago. Mason died long ago." Hearing the children's laughter, I reflexively chased after them, shouting, "My child! My child!" The children scattered in a clamor. And so several muddled years passed. Until one night I had an episode, ran out the door, was struck by a passing car, and when I was found I was barely clinging to life. The townspeople could only call Mason. They asked him to come back and make arrangements for this sister-in-law of his. On my deathbed, I finally saw Mason again. Whether seeing my condition pricked his conscience, or he thought I was about to die and no longer a threat, Mason knelt by my bed and confessed, laying everything bare. He said that the one who died back then was indeed Miles. He had only, unable to bear the thought of Claire becoming a widow so young, decided to pretend to be his brother. Because the three of them grew up together as childhood friends, both brothers fell in love with Claire. Claire ultimately chose Miles, and Mason has been resentful ever since. When the car accident happened this time and my younger brother died, he was heartbroken, but he also unexpectedly caught a glimpse of a chance to make up for his regret. How ridiculous. Because he can't bear to let his first love remain a widow, he expects me to take on the consequences of losing a husband? What were all those promises he made to me when we dated and married worth then? Were they just his way of comforting himself after telling himself to let go? What struck me even harder was that Mason told me the child I gave birth to back then did not die. Because Claire was frail and couldn't bear children, he had taken the baby to her to raise. Mason actually had the nerve to explain, "I just think it's better for a child to grow up in a whole family." So should I also be grateful to him and Claire for giving the child they worked hard to bear a complete home? Mason assumed I had lost consciousness and couldn't hear him. In fact, I had a sudden clarity, my mind was terrifyingly lucid. Tears of regret slid from the corners of my eyes. For this man I had trapped my own short life. Sadly, I didn't even have the strength to get up and slap him, so I swallowed my hatred and died. Sis-in-law, for now it's more important to help Big Brother settle the aftermath. Mason's voice pulled me back from my memories. I lifted my eyes to meet his gaze flitted away. After a long pause I finally spoke, every word measured, "You're right. Miles should be allowed to rest in peace with Mason. If he so desperately wanted to be with Claire, then fine, let him be Miles for the rest of his life." At the funeral I was inconsolable, crying in a way that moved everyone present. They thought I was mourning the dead Mason, in truth I was grieving for the person I had been in a past life. Mason and I met and fell in love in college, our relationship was always very strong. Our first encounter was at a small noodle shop by the back gate of the university. At the time I had ordered a bowl of noodles, and because I'd forgotten to tell the owner in advance, a layer of chopped scallions floated on the surface of the broth. I was picking the scallions out with my chopsticks when I suddenly felt someone's gaze on me from across the table. I looked up and met a handsome, refined face. His stare was a little intense. I turned away to avoid it, but my cheeks warmed anyway. Later, we ran into each other a few more times at university. Mason began to court me, and I quickly fell for his gentle attentiveness. Every time we ate together, it became his habit to pick the scallions out for me. But in my previous life I didn't discover until my death that this habit didn't start with me. I wasn't the only one who avoided scallions. Mason said that it was because he saw the way I picked out scallions in the noodle shop and was reminded of Claire that he began to get close to me. Because Miles was with Claire, he no longer had a legitimate reason to pick scallions for Claire, so he compensated his regret with someone else. How ridiculous, making himself sound like some reincarnated scallion picker. Watching the joss paper swirling in the brazier, the anger inside me flared up. In a fit of rage I rushed into the room, grabbed a big handful of odds and ends, and threw them all into the brazier. When Mason recognized what they were, he hurriedly reached to take them back, only to recoil as the flames licked at his hands. "Sis-in-law, what are you doing? Weren't these all things my brother gave you?" What I had thrown into the fire were all the gifts Mason had given me while we were dating. I had once treated them as witnesses to our love. I treasured each one, keeping them in a cabinet like precious treasures. Mason knew how much I treasured those things, so when he saw me burn every single one without leaving anything, he couldn't hold back. Facing his reproach, I sobbed, "It's precisely because your brother gave them to me that I want to burn them. Keeping them will only make me hurt more by reminding me of him." Mason's tone weakened. "But you can't destroy all of them, at least keep one or two. He's gone, what use are those things?" I cut him off. "Your brother has been reduced to ashes. Can a few lifeless objects take the place of a living person? The relatives beside him kept coaxing, "Miles, just let your sister-in-law burn it, Mason's gone, she's got it hard in her heart." Mason's mouth opened and closed several times before finally shutting. I watched his straining, restrained expression and thought the relative was wrong, the one with a heavy heart isn't me. In the latter half of the funeral, unable to squeeze out any tears, I slipped out for air. Unexpectedly, I overheard a conversation between Mason and Claire. Claire said, "Mason, since you've decided to take care of me for the rest of my life for Miles, why do you still keep staring at Ava? Have you forgotten you're no longer her husband?" Mason hurried to explain, "No, it's not like that. I just saw her crying so bitterly and was afraid she'd be too shocked." Claire pouted in grievance, "But the one who's dead now is Miles. Mason, I'm really scared, please don't leave me alone. Actually, if Miles hadn't confessed to me first back then, maybe we would have." Seeing her in tears, Mason cradled her and soothed her tenderly. "That's right. In the past life, the unflinching Claire who accused me of trying to steal her man always knew that the one who had returned was Mason. But when Mason said he was Miles, she didn't step forward to refute it, she even chose to play along. Perhaps for her it didn't matter which of the brothers her husband was, in any case, both of them were utterly devoted to her. Besides, who would want to become a widow at such a young age? Only Miles was truly pitiable. Not only was the name on his tombstone not his, but his woman was already pouring her heart out to his elder brother. I wonder if, down in the underworld, he'd feel the shame like a green wreath on his head. I turned and walked away, hand in my pocket squeezing the thin household register. Mason had even used his own identity when he cremated him, to make the fake seem real. As for me, I had already taken the death certificate to the registry and changed the records. The marital status entry, from married to widowed. After the funeral, I went to the city hospital. In my last life, I only discovered I was pregnant when the symptoms became obvious. That child became my obsession. But I only saw him once, at his birth, before I died. Let's say my son and I were never meant to be together. This time I don't want him to become the tie between Mason and me. After scheduling the surgery, I was about to leave the hospital. A voice behind me called me back. "Ava?" I turned around, and a figure in a white coat approached. "It really is you." "Liam." I smiled and nodded at the newcomer. "Long time no see." Liam looked genuinely surprised. "You came to the hospital too." He saw the test results in my hand and suddenly understood, offering his congratulations. I didn't explain, only returned his smile. After a few polite words I intended to take my leave. But Liam stopped me. "I'm about to finish my shift." "Wait a moment, let's have a meal together." I was about to politely decline when he said, "My mom has been mentioning you recently." Liam's mother, my teacher in college. Back then, because I gave up my guaranteed spot for graduate school and insisted on following Mason back to his hometown to get married, she, my mentor, kept scolding me for not being ambitious. I hesitated for a moment, but in the end I stopped and didn't leave. Liam and I took a seat in the restaurant. He probably saw that I was feeling down and tried to cheer me up by bringing up funny things that happened back in college. But the more he said, the more foolish I felt for having decided to marry Mason after graduation. When he saw my face getting worse with every word, Liam looked embarrassed. Seeing him scratching his head like that, I finally couldn't help but laugh out loud. Liam let out a sigh of relief. "Good, you're laughing. Pregnant women can't keep a long face all day." And at that moment, a voice abruptly cut in. "Ava." I turned my head and saw, a few tables away, Mason and Claire standing together. Mason's eyes were wide, his gaze swinging back and forth between me and Liam. Liam saw them too. As alumni who often ran into each other on campus, he of course recognized Mason. He was about to say hello when I beat him to it. What a coincidence, Miles, little brother and sister-in-law. I waved at Mason and Claire, then introduced them to Liam. "Liam, let me introduce you, this is Mason's twin brother, and the woman next to him is his wife." "Twins, younger brother?" Liam looked puzzled, but courteously introduced himself. Mason, however, was not very friendly. He strode over to our table and brusquely asked me, "What are you doing here?" I smiled. What else would we be doing here but eating? Mason clearly didn't believe me, his face full of anger. Ava. My brother just passed away, how can you be flirting with a man so soon? I knew what he was angry about. In college, Liam had once confessed his feelings to me, but I turned him down. Later, when I started seeing Mason, he learned about what had happened between Liam and me and often complained about how I kept seeking out teachers to discuss academic matters. He was afraid that because of my connection with the teachers, I would have more contact with Liam and might cross a line. How ridiculous. From the moment I began seeing him, he was the only one in my heart. And yet he could carry on a relationship and marry me while keeping Claire in his heart. How can a person be so shameless and double-standard? Besides, what right does he have now to question me? Under his accusing gaze, I looked sorrowful. Miles, I dreamed about your older brother last night. Mason's expression froze instantly. I went on, in the dream, your brother told me not to grieve for him, to move on from his death and look forward, which is why I went into town today to clear my head. Meeting Liam was just a coincidence. In public, we were eating and talking like normal people. How can you describe us with such ugly words? The more I spoke, the more aggrieved my voice sounded, and murmurs rose from the surrounding tables at once. I thought this man looked so fierce, I figured he was here to catch someone in the act. Turns out he's just the younger brother. Exactly. Not to mention they came in to eat and behaved themselves the whole time. Even if there was something, what business is it of a younger brother? Her husband died, are we really going to expect the woman to mourn alone for the rest of her life? What era do you think we're in? It's not like we're trying to compete for who gets to build a chastity gate. Mason's face was a frightening shade of black. Claire, standing beside him, flushed one moment and went pale the next. Finally unable to stand the pointing fingers and whispered comments any longer, she stomped out. Just as Mason was about to chase after him, I stopped him. Miles, as the saying goes, a sister-in-law should be like a mother. I don't expect you to treat me as your mother, but you must at least respect that I'm an elder. From now on, stop doing that ill-bred thing of calling your sister-in-law by her given name. If you bully your widowed sister-in-law, be careful, your big brother might come into your dreams at night to teach you a lesson. I was implying something. He shamelessly coveted his brother's woman and really wasn't afraid that Miles, even as a ghost, would not let him off. Mason ground his teeth but was helpless. In the end he could only leave awkwardly. After he left, Liam stared at me for a long time. Finally he asked cautiously, Ava, is Mason really dead? I nodded expressionlessly, he's really dead. He's probably been reincarnated by now. Liam asked me tactfully if I was facing some difficulty. I didn't say much. I didn't want my problems to become someone else's burden. Seeing I wouldn't talk, he had no choice but to let it go. When we parted, he told me to contact the teacher if I had the time. I nodded in agreement, yet still lacked the courage to face the person who had only ever cared for me but whom I had broken so completely. By the time I returned to town, the moon had already risen over the treetops. I pulled out my key to open the gate. Just as I was about to push it open, a hand reached out from the side and shoved me in along with it. I was about to scream when the man hurriedly revealed himself. It's me. Miles? I frowned. Before I could ask why he was here, Mason spoke up. Ava, you came back so late, were you with Liam? None of your business, I snapped at him impatiently. How is this none of my business? I am your, Mason began but didn't dare finish. I looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Your what? I didn't know your authority had grown so great that you can meddle in my widowed sister-in-law's affairs now. Hearing my sarcastic tone, Mason stared at me for a long moment, then finally let out a sigh. He shook his head with a wry smile. You recognized me after all. I knew I couldn't keep it from you. I pretended not to understand. What are you talking about? He ignored me and went on, honestly, I had no choice either. Claire has been frail since she was a child and needs someone to look after her. If she were to live alone from now on she wouldn't manage, so I thought of pretending to be Miles, and you've always been a strong person. I couldn't help but find it laughable. Claire is a bit delicate, but not to the point of being unable to take care of herself. Even if she did have trouble in daily life, it would be natural for her brother and sister-in-law to help out. But Mason insisted on doing something so absurd. It was nothing more than his unwillingness to accept that Claire had chosen his brother back then. Now, seeing me meet with Liam, his possessiveness flared up, he couldn't keep acting and came to confess. Was I supposed to sympathize with his plight? This isn't a church where my family lives. Ava, I was wrong. I know now that you can't live without me either. Mason saw I didn't respond and thought I was sulking with him. He studied my expression and offered what he thought was a perfect compromise. How about this? I'll take on both ancestral lines from now on, look after you and Claire at the same time, and I'll work hard to give you both a good life. I almost threw up. I couldn't understand how I had ever been attracted to such a disgusting man. I shook my head violently, trying to shake the water that had entered my brain all those years ago out. My head spun so hard I couldn't help but gag. Mason widened his eyes at the sight. Ava, you don't mean to say you have. I pushed away the hand he reached out to steady me, face full of disgust. Miles, stop saying that. I'm afraid I'll actually vomit. Seeing my strong rejection, Mason put on a hurt expression. Ava, don't call me Miles anymore, I'm Mason. Mason is dead. I said coldly. Have you forgotten? You're the one who cremated him, you took the ashes, and the death certificate says Mason. The person Mason has disappeared from society's perspective. I spoke each word, forcing him to stagger backward. Miles, what proof do you have that you're Mason? Mason froze, looking at me in disbelief. Then he seemed to remember something, rolled up his sleeve and was about to show me. When I saw the scar that had already crusted over, every word stuck in my throat. Of course, he had finally remembered, he had been the one to remove the birthmark that would have proved his identity. Miles, go back now. Don't act crazy here. My voice seemed to be tempered into ice. In my last life, when I demanded that he admit he was Mason, this was exactly how he spoke to me. Sister-in-law, hurry home, don't lose your mind here. No. No. It's not like that. I am Mason. Ava, how can you not recognize me? Mason couldn't accept my coldness and began trying to hold me. I mustered all my strength and burst out from my throat, help. Someone, please. Help. The lights next door came on. After a clatter and bang, neighbors Rose and Henry came running over with brooms. Watts, what happened? Henry was a little on the heavy side, he was panting after those few steps. I huddled behind the two of them like I'd seen angels, pointed a finger at Mason. Miles, he tried to assault me. What? Rose's eyes went wide. Miles, are you out of your mind? That's your sister-in-law. What a sin. I'm not. Mason tried to explain, but didn't know how to start. People always say a widow's door brings trouble. Miles's brother just died, and if you do something like this you'll be struck by lightning from heaven. You'd better go back and don't stay here. Rose grabbed a broom and drove Mason out. Henry also wore an expression that said there were no words and urged him to leave. Just as they were about to push him to the door, Claire arrived. Rose called out repeatedly, Claire, hurry and take Miles away. Don't let him make a scene here. Claire looked mortified, grabbing Mason to leave. But Mason clearly didn't want to go, and kept staring at me with pleading eyes. I stuck my head out from behind Rose and called to Claire, sister-in-law, when you get home you need to have a proper talk with Miles. Don't let him keep daydreaming about splitting the lineage between two branches and all that nonsense. After all, some people's faces I don't want, but I still want mine. After hearing me, Claire stopped trying to persuade him. With a little sob she ran off crying. Mason glanced at me with a complicated expression, then turned and chased after her. In the days that followed, Mason didn't show up in front of me. He was probably busy consoling Claire. While he was distracted, I went to the hospital and had the abortion. When I woke from the anesthesia, a few people were gathered around the hospital bed. Seeing my teacher's eyes full of concern, I couldn't help but feel my nose sting. "Teacher," I started, my voice instantly thick with sobs, "I'm sorry." My teacher's eyes were red, pretending to be angry. She gave the blanket a slap. "You child, if I hadn't come to see you, were you really going to leave me without contact for the rest of your life? Could your teacher stay mad at you forever? If Liam hadn't told me, I wouldn't even have known you'd suffered so much." Liam stood beside me apologetically and explained, "Ava, don't blame me for being meddlesome. I saw you come in alone for the surgery and I just asked the nurse." "It's all right, Liam, thank you." My gratitude came from deep within. "Thank you for giving me a chance to reconcile with the teacher and with myself." Okay, don't pressure Ava to talk so much. She just had surgery and needs to rest." A gentle female voice cut in, and a pair of hands smoothly tucked the blanket around me. "Sister-in-law," my nose began to twinge again. Liam's wife lightly tapped my forehead. "I still prefer you call me senior sister." After a period of observation, senior sister walked me home. Before saying goodbye to the teacher, she took my hand and said, "Everyone makes a few wrong choices in life, and everyone must pay for their choices, but this time the teacher is willing to catch you. My research team still has one slot reserved. Once you've recovered, come find me." I threw myself into the teacher's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Because I deliberately started a few rumors, saying that Miles had improper designs on his widowed sister-in-law. So Mason hasn't dared to come to my house recently, and I took the opportunity to hurry up and prepare to leave. When I had almost finished packing, I gave some of the household appliances I couldn't take with me to Henry and Rose. In my past life, when I was mentally unwell, it was thanks to these two good neighbors' care and vigilance that I was spared from multiple assaults. When I left, I gave Rose a letter and told her to hand it to Miles if he came. Rose agreed and watched me go with reluctant eyes. In the car I slowly exhaled a tainted breath. Widowed, childless, light as air. I was going to go reclaim the bright future that had been ruined by my love-struck folly. Epilogue. Half a month after Ava left, Rose was sweeping in front of the door. She saw Miles running up from a distance and looked at him with visible disdain. She couldn't imagine how someone who looked so genteel could do something as filthy as assaulting his sister-in-law. But remembering what Ava had told her, she turned and went into the house, took out the envelope Ava had given her. Mason lingered at Ava's door, hesitating to knock. Rose called to him, handed him the envelope, and said sharply, "Here, this is what Ava left for you." Mason felt an inexplicable flutter of anxiety. "Left for me? What do you mean?" Suddenly his pupils tightened and he grabbed Rose's arm. "Where did Ava go?" "Ouch. Where else could she go? Of course she moved out." Rose, as if she had been touched by something unlucky, slapped hard at the sleeve Mason had grabbed and mumbled, "I bet it was you who scared her away." Mason couldn't care about anything else. He hurriedly charged through the courtyard gate and found the house indeed empty. All his strength drained at once and he collapsed to the ground. Mason had actually been wanting to find a chance these days to go out and see Ava again, but Claire was very wary. The moment he stepped out, she insisted on following. The excitement of having won his white moonlight had been replaced by irritation and helplessness. Today he had another quarrel with Claire. Claire shouted at him, "Don't forget your identity now as Miles." Mason was filled with regret. He shouldn't have been so deluded as to take the idea of posing as his brother. After being with Claire, life hadn't been as sweet as he'd imagined. He now cherished the time with Ava more than anything. Mason ignored Claire's attempts to stop him and burst out the door. He wanted to beg Ava's forgiveness, to tell her he was truly sorry. He wanted to be Mason again, to be Ava's husband again, to return to those plain yet warm days. Mason believed Ava would forgive him. After all, she loved him so much. Otherwise she wouldn't have given up the chance to pursue graduate school to come to the town and marry him. But the emptiness before his eyes shattered his illusions. Mason suddenly remembered the note Ava had left him and hurriedly opened it. It wasn't a letter, it was a record of a procedure for an abortion. Ava wrote one line on it: "Miles, when you visit the grave, burn this for your dead big brother, tell him to take good care of his son down there." The paper slipped from his hand, and a pained wail escaped Mason's throat. I hadn't expected to meet Rose again. When I left back then I hadn't left any contact information. Meeting again now felt like fate. Rose had been brought to the city by her son to live, and when she went to the hospital for a checkup, she happened to run into me there attending an academic seminar. Rose praised me, saying I looked well and in good spirits, and congratulated me for having moved on from Mason's death. Ridiculous, actually I was in a good mood because I'd recently started dating a sunny, handsome younger boyfriend. I waved to my boyfriend who was standing not far away, then brought my attention back. "Rose, what did you just say?" "I was saying, that Miles. I don't know what happened, he suddenly went crazy, running around telling people he's Mason, and kept shouting 'Child, child.' But everyone knows Mason is dead, so people are scared there might be something unclean going on." "And what about Claire? Doesn't Claire do anything about him?" "Don't bring her up. That Claire, after Miles went mad she disappeared. Someone in town saw her leaving with a very well-dressed man." I listened to Rose's rambling and felt a twinge of emotion. These past few years buried in academic work, I thought I'd lost some of my hatred for Mason. Yet I hadn't expected that upon hearing more bad news about him, I'd still feel an unavoidable sense of satisfaction. A small boat can't easily pass through 10,000 mountains. Hearing that he isn't doing well, I feel relieved. After sending Rose off, I told my boyfriend we'd skip the street stalls tonight and have a proper dinner. He asked curiously why. I replied, suddenly remembered today is the anniversary of my prematurely dead ex-husband's death. We'll celebrate together. Oh no, pay our respects.